You watched another conversation fade away without ever understanding why. No argument happened, no betrayal that anyone could point to. People simply stopped reaching out. Invitations became less frequent. Messages were answered with shorter replies until one day they stopped coming altogether. You began wondering if there was something about you that quietly pushed people away. Maybe you cared too deeply. Maybe you were too quiet. Maybe you were too different to fit anywhere. After enough experiences like this, you stopped expecting anyone to truly stay. Even when you found yourself surrounded by people, you still carried that strange feeling of standing outside an invisible window, watching everyone else effortlessly build the friendships you had always hoped for. It is a painful place to be, because loneliness is not only about having no one around you. Sometimes the deepest loneliness is being surrounded by people, while feeling completely unseen. You smile when everyone else smiles. You listen while others speak. You celebrate their victories and comfort them in their pain. Yet somehow you return home wondering if anyone really knows your heart. You have prayed about it more times than you can count. Sometimes the prayer is not even spoken aloud anymore. It is simply a sigh that only God hears. Lord, why does this keep happening? Why do I always feel like I am searching for a place where I belong? Why does it seem so easy for everyone else to build lasting friendships while I continue walking through seasons that feel so empty? Perhaps you have even questioned yourself because of it. Maybe you assumed that if your faith were stronger, your loneliness would disappear. Maybe you believed that following God should automatically make relationships easier. Yet instead, you have found yourself learning difficult lessons that nobody prepared you for. Faith does not remove every lonely season. Sometimes it gives us the strength to walk through one. That does not mean God has forgotten you. It does not mean you are being punished. It does not even mean there is something fundamentally wrong with who you are. It simply means that not every season has the same purpose. Some seasons are filled with many voices. Others are quiet enough for us to hear God's voice more clearly than ever before. Think about the moments when you have felt the most misunderstood. Perhaps you tried to explain what you were carrying inside, but the words never seemed large enough to express it. People offered quick advice when what you really needed was someone willing to sit beside you without trying to fix everything. They assumed you were distant, when in reality you were exhausted. They thought you were cold when you were simply protecting a heart that had learned to be careful. Those experiences can slowly convince a person that being alone is safer than risking disappointment again. Yet even in those moments, Scripture reminds us that God is close to the brokenhearted. That promise does not erase the pain immediately, but it reminds us that loneliness is never the whole story. Many of the people God used throughout the Bible experienced seasons when they stood apart from those around them. Their stories were not identical, and neither is yours, but they remind us that feeling different is not the same as being abandoned. Sometimes growth happens quietly. Character is often shaped away from crowds, where applause cannot become the reason we keep going. Those hidden seasons can teach patience, humility, compassion, and dependence on God in ways that comfort alone rarely does. If this reflects something you have experienced, let me know in the comments. You do not have to share every detail. Simply writing that you understand may encourage someone else who has quietly been carrying the same burden. There is another reason these seasons hurt so deeply. We were created for relationship. From the beginning, Scripture presents community as something good. Wanting close friendships is not weakness. Wanting people who know your heart is not evidence that your faith is lacking. It is part of being human. Sometimes people who have spent years feeling isolated begin criticizing themselves for still longing for connection. They tell themselves they should not need anyone. Yet that is not the lesson God teaches. Instead, He invites us to bring those desires honestly before Him while continuing to grow into people who love others with wisdom, patience, and grace. It is possible that some friendships ended because life changed. Others may have faded because people were walking different paths. Some relationships were healthy for a season, but not meant to last forever. That reality can still hurt, but endings are not always signs of failure. Looking back, you may already recognize moments when God used even painful disappointments to deepen your compassion for others. Perhaps because you know what it feels like to be overlooked, you now notice the person standing quietly by themselves. Because you know rejection, You are quicker to welcome someone who feels left out. Pain does not become good simply because it teaches us something, but God is able to bring good even through painful experiences. Maybe you have wondered whether you will always feel this way. The future remains unknown, and none of us can promise exactly what relationships lie ahead. What we can know is that your value has never depended on the number of people who choose to stay. The love of God is not measured by your social circle. Your identity is not determined by how many messages appear on your phone or how many invitations arrive each weekend. You matter because you are loved by the one who knows every hidden prayer, every quiet tear, and every question you have never spoken aloud. The hardest moments often come late at night, when distractions disappear and the silence grows louder. That is when memories return. You remember conversations that never happened, friendships that slowly faded, and hopes that remain unanswered. Yet those quiet hours can also become moments when God gently reminds you that He has not stepped away. He continues shaping your character, teaching you perseverance, and inviting you to trust Him even when the path ahead feels uncertain. This does not mean you stop reaching out to others. It does not mean you close your heart or assume everyone will disappoint you. Instead, it means learning to keep your hope anchored in God while remaining open to the relationships He places in your life. Healthy friendships are gifts, not guarantees, and they often grow slowly through honesty, patience, shared experiences, forgiveness, and mutual care. As you continue through this season, remember that feeling different does not mean you are forgotten. Feeling lonely does not mean you are invisible to God. The chapters you are living today are not the entire story. There is still more to learn about how God can meet you in places where no one else fully understands. And sometimes the deepest work He does within us begins in the quiet moments we would never have chosen for ourselves. There is another struggle that rarely gets mentioned because it is difficult to explain to someone who has never experienced it. It is the strange feeling of constantly being present for other people while quietly wondering whether anyone would notice if you disappeared for a while. You become the one who remembers birthdays, who checks on people after difficult days, who offers encouragement when someone else is discouraged. You give pieces of your heart freely because you know how much kindness can mean to a hurting person. Yet when your own heart becomes heavy, you hesitate to reach out because you have learned that not everyone knows how to carry another person's burdens. After enough disappointments, you begin convincing yourself that silence is easier. You tell yourself that everyone has their own problems. You decide not to become one more burden in someone else's life. Little by little, your prayers become the only place where you feel completely honest. You speak to God about fears you have never shared with another person. You admit the questions that would probably confuse even those closest to you. You wonder why your life seems filled with meaningful conversations that rarely become lasting friendships. You begin asking whether there is something missing inside you that everyone else seems to possess naturally. Yet what if the question itself is pointing in the wrong direction? What if your worth has never depended upon your ability to gather people around you? What if the deepest work God is doing in this season has less to do with the number of friends you have and more to do with the kind of person you are becoming while you wait? This is where many people become discouraged because growth almost never feels exciting while it is happening. We often imagine transformation as a dramatic moment, but more often it is a quiet process that unfolds through ordinary days. It happens each time you choose kindness after rejection instead of allowing bitterness to settle into your heart. It happens every time you continue praying after feeling as though heaven has been silent. It happens whenever you decide that disappointment will not become the lens through which you view every future relationship. Those moments may seem small, but they shape who you are in ways that only become visible with time. Consider a tree whose roots grow deep beneath the ground long before anyone notices its height. During those hidden months, nothing about the surface appears impressive. Someone walking past might assume very little is happening. Yet underneath the soil, strength is quietly being formed. Roots spread farther than anyone can see. They learn to reach for water during dry seasons. They become capable of supporting future growth that would otherwise collapse under its own weight. In many ways, our spiritual lives follow a similar pattern. The hidden work often comes before the visible fruit. The seasons that feel the least significant may actually be preparing us for responsibilities we cannot yet imagine carrying well. This does not mean that every lonely season has a simple explanation, or that every unanswered question will eventually make complete sense. Some mysteries remain mysteries. Faith does not require pretending otherwise. Throughout Scripture, we find faithful people who cried out to God with honest confusion. They trusted Him, while also admitting that they did not understand everything He was doing. Their honesty did not drive God away. If anything, it drew them into deeper dependence upon Him. Perhaps that is encouraging for someone who has felt guilty simply for asking difficult questions. God is not surprised by your uncertainty. He already knows the fears you have been carrying. He knows how many times you have smiled in public while feeling empty inside. He knows the conversations you replay in your mind, wondering whether you said something wrong. He knows the invitations that never came and the friendships you hoped would become something lasting. None of those moments escaped His attention. Knowing that does not instantly remove the ache, but it changes the way we carry it. We no longer carry it alone. Sometimes the enemy whispers that your loneliness proves you are unlovable. Scripture answers with a different message. Your identity is rooted first in the God who created you and continues to walk with you, not in the changing opinions of people. Human relationships are valuable gifts, but they were never designed to bear the full weight of your identity. When we expect them to do so, disappointment becomes inevitable because every person, no matter how caring, has limitations. Only God sees every hidden part of your heart without misunderstanding it. Only He remains perfectly faithful through every changing season. Recognizing that truth does not make friendships less important. Instead, it places them in their proper perspective. We can appreciate them deeply without expecting them to fulfill needs that only God can satisfy. As you reflect on your own story, you may also notice something unexpected. The very experiences that made you feel isolated have increased your compassion toward others. You notice the quiet person standing alone after everyone else has formed their circles. You remember what it felt like to wait for someone to start a conversation, so you become the one who walks over first. You recognize sadness behind a smile because you have worn that same smile yourself. In ways you may never fully realize, your pain has made you gentler. It has given you eyes to see people who are often overlooked. That does not erase what you have endured, but it shows that suffering does not have the final word. God can shape tenderness where resentment could have grown. He can produce patience where frustration once threatened to take root. If this message has reminded you of your own journey, share a small part of it in the comments. Someone reading your words may discover that they are not nearly as alone as they believed. Sometimes hope begins simply by realizing another person understands the road you are walking. There are moments when God answers our prayers by changing our circumstances, and there are moments when He strengthens us within them. Neither response is evidence of greater or lesser love. Both reveal His ongoing care in different ways. Looking back over your own life, you may already see situations that once seemed meaningless but later became important chapters in your growth. The painful season itself was never the goal. The character formed through it became part of the gift. You became slower to judge people because you understood hidden struggles. You became quicker to forgive because you recognized your own need for grace. You learned that genuine strength often looks quieter than the world expects. These are not glamorous lessons, but they are deeply valuable. They shape the kind of person who brings peace rather than division, encouragement rather than criticism, humility rather than pride. Perhaps that is why Scripture so often emphasizes perseverance. It is not because perseverance is easy. It is because God can use it to form something beautiful within us over time. Even now, while you may still be waiting for friendships that feel safe, genuine, and lasting, your story is continuing to unfold. The chapter you are living today is not the conclusion. There is still room for healing, for unexpected connections, for opportunities to love others well, and for a deeper awareness of God's faithful presence in every season. Before we continue, hold on to this thought. The measure of your life is not determined by how many people know your name. It is shaped by the quiet faithfulness with which you continue walking, loving, hoping, and trusting God even when the path feels lonely. Sometimes the greatest victories begin where almost no one is watching, and the work God is doing within your heart today may become a source of comfort and encouragement for others in ways you cannot yet see. As you look back over your life, you may begin to notice a pattern that never made sense while you were living through it. Certain doors closed without warning. Certain friendships that seemed unbreakable slowly disappeared. There were people you imagined would remain beside you for years, yet they quietly became strangers. At first, every ending felt personal. Every goodbye felt like evidence that something inside you was broken. You replayed conversations, searching for the exact moment everything changed. You wondered whether one different decision could have kept someone from leaving. Those thoughts can become exhausting because they convince you that every loss is your responsibility. But with time, many people discover something they could not have seen while the pain was still fresh. Not every relationship was meant to accompany every season of your life. Some people walked with you while you learned one lesson. Others were present while you found the courage to overcome a particular challenge. Their role was real, meaningful, and valuable, even if it was temporary. Accepting that truth does not remove the sadness of goodbye, but it frees you from carrying unnecessary guilt for every ending you could not control. There are seasons when God teaches us through companionship, and there are seasons when He teaches us through quiet dependence on Him. Neither season lasts forever. Both have something important to offer. The difficulty is that while you are in the middle of the lonely season, it rarely feels temporary. It feels as though nothing will ever change. It feels as though everyone else has found their place while you continue searching. Yet feelings, as powerful as they are, do not always tell the whole story. They reveal what your heart is experiencing, but they do not define your future or determine your value. One of the greatest challenges during lonely seasons is resisting the temptation to believe the worst about yourself. When enough people leave, your mind naturally begins creating explanations. Perhaps I am too much. Perhaps I am not enough. Perhaps nobody could truly love someone like me. Those conclusions may feel convincing because they are repeated so often inside your thoughts, but repetition does not transform a lie into truth. Scripture consistently reminds us that our identity begins with God's love, not with human approval. His knowledge of you is complete. He sees your strengths and your weaknesses, your victories and your failures, your confidence and your hidden fears, yet His invitation to walk with Him remains. That does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you never walk through it unnoticed. Imagine how different your days might become if you truly believed that every quiet prayer mattered to God, even when no immediate answer appeared. Imagine waking each morning believing that your life still held purpose, even during seasons that felt ordinary or lonely. Imagine choosing to remain kind after disappointment, not because people always deserve it, but because you refuse to let pain determine the person you become. Those quiet decisions often shape our lives more than dramatic moments ever could. They form habits of faith that remain steady when circumstances continue changing. This is also where gratitude quietly begins reshaping the heart. Gratitude does not ignore loneliness. It simply refuses to allow loneliness to become the only thing we can see. It notices the faithful friend who did remain, instead of only mourning those who left. It recognizes small acts of kindness that once seemed insignificant. It thanks God for His presence, even while continuing to pray for meaningful relationships. Gratitude and longing can exist together. Hope and sadness can occupy the same heart. Faith is not pretending that everything is perfect. Faith is continuing to trust God's character, even when life still contains unanswered questions. Perhaps the friendships you long for will come slowly rather than suddenly. Genuine relationships often grow through ordinary moments that seem unremarkable at first. A conversation after church, a shared meal, a simple act of encouragement, a willingness to listen without trying to impress. Lasting friendships are rarely built through perfection. They grow through consistency, honesty, forgiveness, and mutual care over time. As you wait for those relationships, continue becoming the kind of friend you hope to find. Continue showing compassion. Continue choosing integrity. Continue offering grace. Not because these actions guarantee a particular outcome, but because they reflect the character God is patiently shaping within you. There is another beautiful truth that often becomes visible only after many years. The people who have endured seasons of loneliness frequently become the safest people for others to approach. They know how much courage it takes to admit weakness. They know the value of listening without rushing to solve every problem. They understand that sometimes the greatest gift you can offer another person is simply your presence. If your life has included those painful seasons, perhaps God can use that experience to help you become someone who notices the overlooked, welcomes the outsider, and encourages the discouraged. Your scars do not have to become symbols of defeat. In God's hands, they can become reminders of His sustaining grace through difficult chapters. That does not glorify suffering itself. Loneliness is still painful. Rejection is still painful. Waiting is still painful. But pain does not have the final word when God is at work. Redemption does not always mean removing every difficulty immediately. Sometimes it means bringing hope, wisdom, compassion, and deeper faith through circumstances we never would have chosen. As you continue forward, remember that your life cannot be measured by popularity. Heaven's perspective has always differed from the world's. The world often celebrates visibility, influence, and recognition. God repeatedly values faithfulness, humility, perseverance, and love. Many of the most meaningful acts of obedience happen where almost no one else is watching. Every quiet prayer, every unseen act of kindness, every decision to forgive, every moment you continue trusting God instead of surrendering to despair. None of these are wasted. They become part of the story God is writing in your life, even when you cannot yet see how every chapter fits together. One day you may look back and realize that the seasons you wanted to escape were also the seasons in which your relationship with God became more genuine than ever before. You learned to seek Him not because everything was going well, but because you discovered He remained faithful even when life felt uncertain. That kind of faith is not built overnight. It grows slowly, often through tears, questions, and quiet perseverance. If today you still find yourself wondering why you have so few friends, do not rush to conclude that something is wrong with you or that God has forgotten you. Continue bringing your desires honestly before Him. Continue remaining open to the people He places in your path. Continue believing that your worth has never depended upon how many people choose to stay. Above all, remember that you are deeply known by the One who never loses sight of you. He sees every hidden struggle, every silent prayer, every moment you almost gave up but chose to keep trusting. Even when the road feels lonely, His presence remains constant. Even when your heart still carries unanswered questions, His faithfulness does not change. Your current season is only one chapter, not the entire story. Keep walking in hope, keep growing in grace, and keep believing that no season lived with God is ever without purpose, even when its meaning is revealed only one step at a time.